Our Foreign Secretary David Lammy and what he had to say in the House of Commons yesterday, where he announced there'd be sanctions against members of the senior figures in the Israeli government, but also that we would cease trade talks with Israel over what he called the monstrous and absolutely outrageous and unacceptable attacks on civilians in Gaza by the Israeli forces. But what is really monstrous and what is really beyond the pale, surely, is the British government not standing by our closest ally in the Middle East. Let's talk about this with Jake Wallis Simons. He's author of the great book Israelophobia, the newest version of the oldest hatred and what to do about it. He's also now a columnist with the Daily Telegraph. Very good morning to you, Jake.
Good morning.
I have to say, I had to switch the telly off yesterday. I actually couldn't listen to David Lammy. I was so appalled. It's the virtue signalling to the media classes, to the BBC, to the backbenches, the MPs that aren't even Labour MPs, the MPs effectively who ran on a Gaza platform in their local constituencies, and this big concern about what people will think of you if you stand by Israel. Because, of course, if you do watch mainstream media in this country, if you only get your information from the BBC, you would think that Israel was responsible for the war that is currently going on in Gaza. Nothing to do with Hamas at all.
Yeah, and talking of what people think about it, the most interesting response, I think, came from Hamas. Hamas released a statement calling Lammy's new stance, which he's taken on behalf of our country, a principled stance. Now, if Hamas is calling your policy position a principled stance, that should tell you something about how history will judge you, let alone judge Israel. But there's something else I wanted just to point out to you, Julia, and to your viewers and listeners, because I think it hasn't been highlighted enough. This claim about 14,000 babies who need help or they're going to die within the next 48 hours.
And this is a claim, I think, from the UN now?
Made by the UN. It has been debunked by the BBC. It was a claim made on the Today programme yesterday by the UN chief, Tom Fletcher. Yep. The BBC queried it, and the UN came back and said, well, they want to get aid to 14,000 babies, quote, ideally within the next 48 hours. The BBC then dug further and found there was a UN report which said a while ago that 14,000 infants would likely experience malnutrition within April 2025 and March 2026, over a year, a period of a year, not within 48 hours. So it seems to be a load of rubbish which has been debunked by the BBC.
I mean, this is unusual. BBC Verify actually doing some work, actually verifying things, because normally they just call one of their friendly journalists who work for Hamas in Gaza and ask them what they think.
Yeah, call it back.
And I'm not joking. That's literally what they do. I mean, it really is what's been going on. I mean, also the other thing that's being debunked, not seen it on the BBC or on Sky or ITV or anywhere else. All these reports the other week about this horrific attack on a hospital by IDF forces, dozens and dozens of civilians, including babies and young children, dying as a result of that. And then, and they being clearly a war crime, genocidal, etc., etc. But then it emerged that some very senior Hamas figures, including Mohammed Yahya Sinwar's brother, was among those people who were killed in this attack. So then the idea that when the IDF say we're targeting somewhere because it's actually it's a command and control station for Hamas using human shields, that when they say that and then it's proven, the BBC never seems to backtrack and say that actually that was a legitimate war target.
Yeah, I mean, the most annoying thing really is how Hamas makes no secret of its strategy. It is to hide amongst civilians, to base its leaders, its fighters under hospitals, for example, as was the case here, in the hope that Israel will attack, killing civilians, and then the media will cover it as an Israeli, quote-unquote, war crime. It happens again and again, and we know that it's happening. We know
it's been debunked again and again as well. Now,
exactly. We know that Israel takes measures to protect civilians that no other army takes, and yet Hamas is trying to put children in harm's way for media wins. And the media has got blood in its hands, frankly, by playing into the strategy and making it all possible.
And indeed, and when I watched, and again, I consume a large array of different media because I want to hear different perspectives, but I have to say, again, I'm really struggling with the BBC now in some of their coverage because it is so one-sided. An awful lot of war reporters who apparently have never known any civilians die in wars. Now, the reality is, it's horrific what is happening to civilians in Gaza, but it is largely the fault of Hamas, who, as you say, not only are they not not mind if civilians die. Not only are they deliberately putting them down, they actively want civilians. They want to have bodies of dead children because they can parade them in the media. And by the way, not a single bit of footage comes out of Gaza on our television screens which hasn't been given a big tick from Hamas. They control what comes out of the country. So they actively are willing this. It's part of their war policy is to deliberately have civilian casualties. They actually, in the past, have stopped civilians when they get a warning from the IDF that we are going to be, bombing this particular target because we believe there's a Hamas commanders there. And civilians are warned, and that happens routinely. They stop civilians leaving so that they would rather they die. But again and again and again, the war reporters, the correspondents, some really senior figures at the BBC, they treat this war as if it is, like Gary Lineker appears to think, because he gets his news from TikTok, completely unprecedented. The level of death, the number of civilians, the number of children who are dying, the targeting of civilian targets. This is unprecedented in modern warfare. And none of that is true, is it?
That's right. I mean, it's the Lineker classes, if you like, by which I include a lot of the mainstream media reporters and David Lammy. Yeah. It's these people who their response enables Hamas's strategy. In the eyes of Hamas, every single civilian death, whether it's on its own side or on the Israeli side, is a victory. Yeah. From the Israeli point of view, every single innocent death, whether it's on the Palestinian side or on the Israeli side, is a tragedy and a defeat. And it's our media classes, our Lineker classes, who have enabled this. And I would say that, I mean, you talk about the focus on civilian deaths in this conflict. We just need to cast our mind back to our own war against the Islamic State in 2017, 2018, when we engaged in the Battle of Mosul, supporting Iraqi and Kurdish ground troops with our American partners from the air. That had a death toll of about up to 40,000 people, and nobody cared. There were nobody on the streets of London protesting against the civilians who were killed in that campaign, because we wanted Islamic State, who blew up people on our streets, massacred people in Paris, in Berlin, in Brussels, in Stockholm and elsewhere, many of which I covered on the ground as a reporter. We wanted them gone, we wanted them dead, and we didn't really care how it was done. Suddenly, when the Israelis are trying to defend their own people from the similar butchery by a similar organisation, everyone's up in arms and telling them to stop. Why do they want them to stop? Because, unfortunately, they favour Hamas. They want Hamas to win. But
this is the terrible thing. And again, the British Army, the American Army, no Western military power has ever achieved the ratio of civilian deaths to combatant deaths in any modern warfare at all. So not the Second World War, not in Iraq War, not Afghanistan War, not, as you say, taking on ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And when I say that, not because Israel and their forces are killing uniquely huge numbers of civilians, which is what the impression is. I've spoken to so many friends, and I always think you're just getting all your news from the BBC, aren't you? Because they think that is what's happening. On the contrary, no government has ever achieved in their warfare the low number of civilian deaths. Every death is a tragedy, but the one roughly, even on Hamas's own figures, the roughly 1-to-1 ratio of civilian to combatant deaths has never been achieved, and that's because they're being so careful. It is still a tragedy when any child or innocent civilian, adult or others, dies. But the reality is, this is what we call war. This is why you don't start wars. This is why you try not to have wars. You avoid wars. You try to end wars. What do you make of this idea that Israel needs to be sort of pushing for a ceasefire? They need to be withdrawing troops. They need to be negotiating, because that's how you get the hostages out. Is that the answer?
Well, I think that it's, if I had an answer, I would, I mean, nobody really has the answer. Everyone only has judgment. And in the past, we've seen that the first wave of hostages that were released by Hamas came as a response to intense military pressure from the Israelis. Subsequently, we've seen that as well. Yes, there's negotiation, but that negotiation only happens when you put Hamas under enough pressure to bring them to the negotiating table. I mean, the extent to which Hamas is still holding out these hostages, even though all of their leadership has been decimated and destroyed and killed, many of their thousands upon thousands of their fighters have been killed, Gaza's been destroyed, Hezbollah's been taken out, the Iranians have been humiliated, they're still holding on to these hostages underground. I mean, this is just...
torturing them and starving them.
of how appalling these people are. They're not even people. These animals are, frankly.
Yeah.
And Israel wants its people back and is entitled to want its people back. I would want the British government to go to the ends of the earth to get me back.
And we would. A lot of the people, and including the MPs who right now are condemning Israel, I'd love to know, where would you be right now if this had happened, if this October the 7th had happened in our country? What would you be expecting to do? Because we know what happened after 9/11, again, going into Afghanistan, the perceived threat from Iraq and going to Iraq. All of these things had massive public support, massive support in Parliament as well. And, you know, I know we were lied to in terms of that, you know, 45 minutes in Iraq, but massive support for all of these wars, where far greater number of civilians died. I mean, on a much, much grander scale. And it just seems to me, you know, we need to be on the side. There'll be errors made. We won't. And I'm sure neither you nor I hold a candle for Benjamin Netanyahu. But at the end of the day, there's one democratic nation state in the Middle East, and that is Israel. Yeah. They are fighting a war against Islamo-fascists who seek to kill every single one of them. And once they've killed every Jew, they're going to come for everyone else as well. Yeah, they are at the gates protecting the rest of us, and we need to be by their side.
Exactly. And when David Lammy and his ilk are asked what their suggestion is for getting the hostages out and destroying Hamas so they never do October the 7th again, all they come up with is the two-state solution. Yeah. The best thing to do is look at these guys and say, hey, let's give you a state. That will help. You know, then everyone will be happy and everyone will be safe. It won't happen like that. They don't want a state alongside Israel. They've rejected it year after year, decade after decade. What they want is a state instead.
They want a one-state solution. That state doesn't involve Israel.
They want a one-state solution involving something called genocide in its real meaning.
Jake Wallis Simons, you've been fantastic advocate on this, author of the brilliant book. I do recommend you buy this book, Israelophobia. Thank you very much indeed.